Hey beautiful, I hope you're doing good, staying hydrated, and actually getting enough sleep. Today, you along with Queen Zani will build our Aemeath in a best possible way. So without wasting another second, let's dive straight into her kit explanation. At her core, Aemeath has two forms, her normal self and her mech. You're not meant to pick one and stay there. The game constantly nudges you to switch back and forth because form swapping is where a lot of her damage, resource gain, and flow come from. When you swap, you often attack at the same time, so it never feels like wasted movement. Now let's talk about the two bars that secretly control her entire life: synchronization rate and resonance rate. Synchronization rate is the one you'll see filling up constantly as you fight. Normal attacks, mech attacks, and her special swap attacks all feed into it. When this bar gets high enough, it lets you use her enhanced moves and her big mid-combo damage skill. Resonance rate is slower and more limited, and it basically acts as a gatekeeper for her ultimate finisher. When both bars are full at the same time, that's the game saying, okay, you're allowed to delete something now. Her basic attacks might seem boring at first, but they matter a lot. Both Aemeath and the mech have 4 hit strings, and the 4th hit is the important one. Reaching that final hit unlocks a special state called Seraphic Duo, which is basically a short window where her strongest skills are enabled. So in practice, you're often just doing clean basic attack chains until you hit that 4th strike, because that's where her real damage starts to open up. After certain attacks, like later hits in her combo, heavy attacks, or dodge counters, you can press her resonance skill to trigger what's called a sync strike. This is one of her coolest mechanics. A sync strike deals damage and instantly swaps her form. If you were human, you go mech. If you were mech, you go back to human. These swaps don't interrupt combat, they extend it. You're meant to weave them naturally into your strings, so the fight feels like one long, flowing sequence rather than separate phases. Once you've hit that 4th basic attack and entered Seraphic Duo, her kit really starts flexing. If your synchronization ray is high enough, you can use Seraphic Duet, which is a big multi-hit attack that also swaps your form again. This skill counts as resonance liberation damage and gets heavily buffed depending on which resonance mode you're in. This is one of her main damage buttons, not just a flashy extra. That brings us to her 2 resonance modes, which define how she wants to deal damage. Toon Rupture mode is her single target boss killer setup. It stacks special marks on enemies and rewards teams that can interact with Toon Rupture effects. Fusion Burst mode, on the other hand, turns her into an area damage monster. Enemies start exploding in chain reactions, stacks build and detonate, and fights get very chaotic very fast. You usually pick Toon Rupture for bosses and Fusion Burst for mob-heavy content. Eventually, you reach the point where you activate her Resonance Liberation, called Heavenfall Edict Overdrive. This isn't the nuke yet. It's the setup. Overdrive deals damage, swaps you into mech form, and puts you into a powered-up state where your skills are stronger and your resource gain spikes. During this phase, your job is simple: fill both bars completely. Heavy attacks charge faster, damage is amplified, and everything you do is pushing you toward the finale. When both synchronization rate and resonance rate are maxed during this state, Overdrive transforms into Heavenfall Edict Finale. This is her true ultimate. It dumps all stored energy in one massive fusion hit, ends her powered-up state, and drops you back into her normal form. She also has Starflux ticking in the background, which is a slower, passive resource. In mech form, if Starflux is high enough, she can activate Starflux Thrust, a continuous damage move that's great for filling downtime or melting groups of enemies. It's not the centerpiece of her kit, but it adds pressure while you're waiting for bigger tools to come back online. Okay, now I think you all have understood how Aemeath works. But the main problem starts when you try to build her. With so many skills and systems, it's easy to get confused about what actually increases her damage and what's just there for flow. The most important thing to understand is that Resonance Liberation is everything for Aemeath. Her entire gameplay revolves around building resources just to unleash Heavenfall Edict Finale, and that single hit accounts for a massive portion of her total damage. Because of that, upgrading Resonance Liberation gives you the biggest and most noticeable damage increase. After that, the next thing that truly matters is her Forte Circuit. This is what amplifies her core mechanics, Toon Rupture or Fusion Burst, and directly strengthens Seraphic Duet. which is her main damage skill before the finisher. Everything after that is supportive rather than essential. Her resonance skill and normal attacks mainly affect how smoothly she builds resources and how much damage she deals while setting up her burst. Her intro skill, on the other hand, is the least important part of her kit from a build perspective. That's why her final upgrade priority looks like this. If you follow this order, you can make better use of your resources. Now let's talk about resonance chains for Aemeath. To be clear from the start, we're not going to go through every single chain. Some of them are luxury, comfort, or team-oriented upgrades that don't really change how strong Aemeath herself feels. Instead, we'll focus only on the important resonance chains. Her Chain 1. Gilded Glimmer of the First Dawn. This is Aemeath's first major power spike, and for many players, it's where she already feels complete. RC1 heavily strengthens her heavy attacks during instant response, giving them massive crit damage and crowd pulling while charging. This alone makes her burst windows much smoother and more consistent. On top of that, the out-of-combat instant response setup lets her enter fights already prepared instead of spending time ramping. The most important part, though, is the sealed trail mechanic. It allows Aemeath to carry Rupturous Trail or Fusion Trail stacks from defeated enemies onto the next target. In real gameplay, this means faster clears, better target switching, and far less downtime rebuilding stacks. Then we have her RC2, which is a very clean damage upgrade. It massively boosts Seraphic Duo, one of Aemeath's core damage skills, and further enhances how both Tune Rupture and Fusion Burst scale. At last, we have her RC3. This is the true breakpoint for Aemeath. RC3 drastically increases the damage of Heavenfall Edict Finale, which is already the centerpiece of her entire kit. On top of that, it replaces her reliance on teammate trigger buffs with self-sufficient crit damage bonuses, depending on her resonance mode. What this means in practice is huge. Aemeath becomes far more flexible, far more consistent, and much less dependent on specific teammates to function at full power. This quality of life improvement is just as important as the raw damage increase. For most players, RC3 offers the best balance of investment and return. So what should you pull for? If your stride is limited, here's the simple answer. Best overall stopping point is RC3, and best single upgrade, if you can only pull once, is RC1. Anything beyond RC3 falls into luxury territory, and is only worth considering if you're aiming for absolute max investment or team-wide buffs, rather than Aemeath's personal damage. Now let's move to Echo sets. Aemeath has a very clear best-in-slot option, and it lines up perfectly with how she deals damage. Her best set is Trailblazing Star. The 2-piece bonus gives her extra fusion damage, which she benefits from across her entire kit, while the 5-piece bonus activates whenever she inflicts Fusion Burst or Tune Rupture shifting. Since she does this constantly during her normal rotation, the buff has near-permanent uptime. What makes this set especially strong is that it grants both crit rate and fusion damage bonus at the same time. Aemeath already gets crit rate from her innate skills and her signature weapon. For her main Echo, there is no debate. Sigmund is her best in slot. Sigmund summons 2 fusion attacks that hit hard on their own, but the real reason it's mandatory is the 25% resonance liberation damage bonus it gives when equipped by Aemeath. Since her damage is heavily concentrated in Heavenfall Edict Finale, this bonus scales exactly where it matters most. The 20-second cooldown also lines up very comfortably with her burst cycle, making it feel natural instead of awkward. If you don't have her best setup yet, there are a few usable alternatives, though they are clearly a step down. A full Molten Rift set can work as a placeholder, especially when paired with Inferno Rider or Nightmare Inferno Rider as the main Echo. Another alternative is Flaming Claw Print, usually paired with Lioness of Glory. This setup can perform decently, but it leans more into general fusion damage rather than amplifying Aemeath's resonance liberation, which is why it falls behind her best-in-slot choices. As for her Echo stat priority, Aemeath follows a very standard main DPS stat logic. For main stats, your cost for Echo should almost always be crit damage or crit rate, depending on what your overall ratio looks like. Both cost 3 Echoes should prioritize fusion damage bonus or attack percent. Fusion damage bonus is ideal because it scales all of her damage sources, including her finisher, but attack percent is a strong and reliable alternative if fusion pieces aren't available yet. For cost 1 Echoes, attack is the correct choice on both. These slots are simply there to push her base damage higher. When it comes to substats, the first thing you want to secure is around 125% resonance energy regeneration. This is important because it allows Aemeath to consistently access Overdrive and line up her finale without downtime. After energy regen is handled, your substat priority becomes crit damage and crit rate at the top, with crit DMG slightly favored for most builds. Following that, attack percent is your next best stat. And finally, resonance liberation damage bonus, which is nice to have but generally less impactful than raw offensive stats. When it comes to team building, Aemeath is actually much simpler than her kit makes her look. She is going to have two main teams, which are built around Toon Rupture and Fusion Burst. The Toon Rupture team is her most stable and widely accepted setup, especially for bosses and single-target content. Aemeath's output is heavily concentrated in her Resonance Liberation, particularly Heavenfall Edict Finale, and this team is built to push that finisher as hard as possible. In this setup, Linnea is the core support. Her outro skill provides a powerful buff that directly benefits Resonance Liberation damage, which Aemeath can fully take advantage of. The remaining slot is usually filled by Mornai or Shorekeeper, depending on whether you want more toon interactions, healing, or general comfort. This team shines in longer fights where timing and maximizing finale matter more than clearing speed. The Fusion Burst team is her second main setup and focuses more on area damage and chain reactions. Instead of funneling everything into a single nuke, this team aims to constantly trigger fusion burst explosions across multiple enemies. This team is more investment sensitive than the Toon Rupture team. It performs best when either Aemeath or Chisa has some resonance chains unlocked, since Fusion Burst scales extremely hard with upgrades. At full investment, its performance can rival the Toon Rupture team, but the difference mainly comes down to scenario rather than raw power. There's also strong future potential here, as dedicated Fusion Burst supports are expected to arrive later. Outside of these two, you'll sometimes see a mono fusion variation, usually pairing Aemeath with Lupa and Mornai. This setup is very straightforward and effective, relying on strong fusion buffs, fast outro cycling, and consistent healing. It doesn't lean as heavily into either Toon Rupture or Fusion Burst mechanics, but it's reliable and easy to pilot. You can even experiment with Chun-Li if you prefer her playstyle. At last, let's talk about her best weapon. Aemeath's signature weapon, Everbright Pulse Star, is not just her best option. It's the weapon her entire kit is clearly designed around. It gives a flat all-attribute damage bonus, which already scales everything she does. But the real value shows up the moment she starts doing what she's meant to do, inflicting Toon Rupture, shifting, or Fusion Burst. Once that happens, her Resonance Liberation damage ignores a huge chunk of enemy defense and fusion resistance. And since Aemeath's damage is overwhelmingly concentrated in Heavenfall Edict Finale, this turns her finisher into an absolute monster. What makes Everbright Pulse Star so important is that it doesn't just boost numbers passively, it directly amplifies the exact moment her damage matters most. Every burst window, every finale, every properly set up rotation gets significantly stronger just because this weapon exists. So if you're wondering about alternatives, honestly, for Aemeath, this is one of those rare cases where I wouldn't recommend settling. Other weapons can function, sure, but none of them come close to matching how perfectly this weapon syncs with her Resonance Liberation-focused playstyle. If you're planning to main Aemeath seriously, Everbright Pulse Star is a must-have. If there's one thing to prioritize alongside her character investment, it's this weapon. Now, let's move on to her ascension materials, because you're going to be farming these a lot if you plan to properly build Aemeath. To level Aemeath herself, you'll mainly need Exo's Warm Cores, which drop from Echoes in Lahai Roi. On top of that, she requires the new Our Choice World Boss material, along with Moss Ember, which you'll be collecting from the overworld. When it comes to upgrading her forte, the material focus shifts slightly. You'll still need Exo's Warm Cores, yes, more of them, but now you'll also be farming polarizer materials from the Forgery Challenge. In addition, her forte upgrades require the new weekly boss drop, Gold and Memory, which means consistent weekly clears are unavoidable if you want to max her out. And with that, that's everything about Aemeath's build. From her gameplay and teams to echoes, weapons, and materials, you now know exactly what you're getting into. If you've made it all the way to the end, you're a legend.